Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Between You and Me. It is bright and early in the day, and I decided to record the podcast episode now, which has its downfalls because I look like I just woke up. And that's because I did. So that's the only downfall. Also, if you're watching, I can't set those books up right here on my shelf. So we're just gonna have to deal with it being leaned over and fallen over, and I hope no one minds. But during this week away from the podcast, this week off, I have done a lot of stuff. I've been very busy and I've had a lot of family events, birthday parties. It was my niece's first birthday. I had a lot of family that I got to see after like many years, and some family that I see all the time. Extended family, things like that. And it brought me to the subject that I wanted to talk about today. And I think we should just like hop right into the episode. Sometimes I feel like I yap too much at the beginning, and I have a lot to talk about this episode, so I want to make sure I'm being direct about where we're headed in the conversation and we don't lose track, which I tend to do. But before we get into the juice of the episode, don't forget you can watch the podcast if you're listening on @BetweenYouAndMePod, and then you can also go onto the Instagram @BetweenYouAndMePodcast. Follow over there to keep along with any updates. I did ask you guys to ask me questions for this episode, so I'll be throwing a couple in as we go through the subjects that we're going to talk about today. So I have my iPad because I have a few notes that we need to talk about today in terms of our subject. So as you guys saw when clicking on this episode, the title is Breaking Generational Trauma and Family Relationships. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with my family this past week, and specifically my extended family, which allowed me to have a little bit of a reflection period, I'd say, on the similarities between like generations. My grandmother, my parents and their siblings, my cousins and myself, like seeing patterns that have developed in terms of behaviors, beliefs, and things that are passed down like traits through biology. And it made me really curious to talk about this subject, which I did do quite a bit of research, which I tend to do sometimes in certain episodes when I'm not completely like knowledgeable about everything, because I don't want to like tell you guys the wrong thing. So the definition of generational trauma can be also known as intergenerational trauma. When I was looking this up, I was confused. I was like, what the heck? Why is there two different terms? But I'm going to be sticking to generational trauma when I speak about it. It means to pass down traumatic experiences or stressors from one generation to another. So when we think about this definition, it's important to note that as children, we are so malleable and we learn very quickly what we see in our parents. And these patterns, the way they behave, how they speak to each other, how they treat each other, are ways that we learn to treat others and how we learn to treat ourselves, depending on how we see them act in conflict, or act when they're angry, or act when they have like, I don't know, stressors in their life, a big project coming up, like things that tend to be negative, quote unquote, but then also positive experiences, how they act when they're happy, how they act when something really amazing happened to them. We are able to learn these patterns, and whether or not we choose to follow subconsciously, especially as children, we tend to pick up on these things, and then they're absorbed into us. We start to act in this certain way. A funny story that I have that I was literally just explaining to my boyfriend the other day is that sometimes, okay, I don't think my dad watches these episodes, but this is no shade to him. It's just funny. But when he would get into like arguments with my mom, or like there would be something like really stressful, sometimes he would leave the house, right? Like he would leave for like 30 minutes, for an hour, go for a walk, go like to the store. I don't know. He would just leave and then come back so we'd have time to cool off. One time I was maybe 7, 8, 9 maybe years old, and I had gotten into an argument with my mom. So we were bickering back and forth, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, whatever, and I leave the house. At the time I lived in Switzerland, I lived in a really safe neighborhood, and I used to play outside all the time for like hours. So it wasn't unsafe for me to do this, but regardless, it was probably like, what the fuck? I left the house, I walked around the neighborhood, and I just remember it was like so drama. I was literally walking around, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. I literally just went for a stroll around the neighborhood, came back 10 minutes later, and I'm like, hey, I'm ready to talk. And my mom's like, what? Literally, where the fuck did you go? She was 10 times more mad than before I left. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? My dad goes out all the time when he's mad. And she's like, yeah, he's an adult. You're not allowed to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. So just a silly little story. But like, honestly, I don't even remember what the argument was about. I don't even remember how it went afterwards. I just remember my mom being so upset and me being like, really? Like, why? My dad can do this. Why can't I do this? Like, I was so confused at what was so bad about me leaving. Of course, she explained it to me after. It's just not normal for a child to just up and leave their house without saying anything. But there we go. That's a very good example of how I had observed something that my dad would do, and I just repeated it without even thinking of like the consequences about it. Like I said, we're bound to learn these patterns and these ways of living from our parents. It's almost inevitable with how moldable we are as children. So at these young ages, we tend to pick up these patterns that you can guess our parents probably picked up when they were younger, and their parents picked up when they were younger, and on and on and on. In terms of generational trauma, there are certain things that are passed down, specifically through behaviors, beliefs, and then through biology as well. So an example of behaviors that can be passed down through generations. I'll start off with something that can be really common in our generation, and that is emotional unavailability and suppressing emotions, avoiding any emotional vulnerability at all. Sometimes this can be traced back through generations. Sometimes it's also just a trait that someone has experienced and it started with them. So this is not always the case, but if it is a very strong pattern and you see it between a parent and a kid, chances are it has come from generations before them. So you can think of it in a sense of, let's say a grandparent, a great-grandparent survived a very traumatic event. There could have been a war, a displacement, a just maybe even traumatic family event that happened. And in order to cope with the stress, especially at a young age, what worked best was to suppress any emotions and to almost cover it up like a band-aid, and that was their way of staying strong. So these situations are learned, they're modeled from parent to child, and once again, as a child, you see how your parent reacts in a situation of high stress. And when they look like there's no emotion on their face and they haven't experienced any stress and they're just, going through their life casually moving, and you're like, wait, but something really bad happened, and they're not expressing any pain, sorrow, anger, grief, nothing. So you begin to realize that that's the safe way of acting. In order to not feel these harsh feelings or these hard situations, you cover it up and you suppress these emotions, and inevitably you learn as a child to bottle up your feelings. Over time, this can create this family culture of very emotionally unavailable people, which can end up making relationships really hard to keep, period, and also very hard to create a healthy dynamic. I've seen a lot of situations where family members will blow up, feel very angry, and then not go through any type of anger or situation or conflict for years and years and years, and then blow up again. So that's what happens when these emotions are suppressed, and the root and core issue between family members is never solved because no one takes the first step to initiate a conversation about it. And they end up just living in this kind of repetitive cycle of constantly being unhappy with certain characteristics of your family unit and then never addressing it the problems keep coming back up over and over again, and then anger and a big fight or a falling out will come from that. Another example of how trauma can be passed down is through beliefs. So this is very interesting. When I was doing this research, I was like, wow, it all makes sense. So I'm glad I'm able to explain this to you guys. But if there was a generation in your family that went through poverty, who had a lot of hardships in terms of being able to support themselves or make money or anything along those lines of like not having a sense of structure or stability when it comes to like any financial needs. And, they worked very hard for their children, and now their children have a more stable financial life. And they have had this really hard life when it comes to money. So they continue to instill their beliefs when it comes to being very frugal or not spending your money here or always having limited resources or never taking risks when it comes to money, never investing your money in certain areas because they think they're not going to get it back. Like there's so many examples of how this belief can affect a family unit, but there tends to be this kind of like voice from your grandparent, great-grandparent, or your parents, and they keep instilling this thought into you like money doesn't come, money just goes, like be careful, even though you might be in a position where you're stable. You're making enough money. You might not be rich, but you have enough money to take care of yourself. You have enough money to spend a little bit more than usual. But it's very looked down upon now in your family. So there's a lot of pressure from other generations, grandparents, like I said, parents, to continue to live in this more frugal, more, scarce mindset type of like financial thought process. And that can also be a belief that's passed down through and through different generations, but you might not be in that situation anymore. Do you know what I mean? These beliefs are instilled into people, and now they grow up and they're very fearful when it comes to money, and they never feel like they're safe. So that's an example of how beliefs can be passed through generations from one generation experiencing that trauma. So the next example of how trauma can be passed down through generations is through biology. I had to do a little bit of research on this part specifically because it's a little bit more science-based and based on different studies and stuff like that. So in terms of trauma being passed down through mother to child or from DNA, it is very possible for things like a person's stress response and the way that the chemicals can change in their hormones and their cortisol levels to be passed down to children. Studies show that these changes can be passed to children through epigenetic modifications, which is where trauma impacts how genes are expressed without changing the DNA itself, but increasing a child's susceptibility to anxiety or stress disorders. So this is very interesting and something that I had always kind of known, just knowing about anxiety and how it can be hereditary through family. But also with a mother being pregnant, if there was a situation where she was very, very stressed out, if she had trauma during that time period, this is going to be passed down to her children, and these children are going to be way more susceptible to all this anxiety. So yeah, that's very interesting. It was interesting for me to learn that and kind of recognize that, hey, this anxiety that you have now or that you've grown up with in your childhood, it doesn't come all from you. You're not like this mistake in your family of like, oh, she was the one with the bad mental health. Because I know that when I grew up, I looked at my siblings and I was like, well, my younger sister was like 2 years old, so that doesn't count when I like started feeling my anxiety and stuff. But even my older sister, she had so much confidence. It didn't feel like she was ever like fearful of anything, experience anxiety or anything like that. So when I would reflect on myself as a kid, I'd be like, there's something wrong with me. Like, it's not normal that I feel this way. But being able to look into your like family tree and see like, okay, I understand, like my grandma didn't have a very easy life. She had a lot of stress that got passed down to here, to here, to here. And it's the reason why, okay, yeah, I'm a little more susceptible to anxiety. So no, there's nothing wrong with you. Yes, it's normal. Could it have been prevented? Maybe, but this is the situation that we're in today. So there can be a slight piece of comfort in knowing that there's nothing wrong with you, right? And a lot of people have experienced this, and it might have come from somewhere, but that doesn't mean that there's any blame, or that doesn't mean that we need to feel resentment, which we're going to get into. After we've had the ability to reflect and recognize, I think the next step would be to address the feelings that are going to come from it. Because it's not easy, like I just said, about, considering the fact that, it's coming from somewhere else. Like my mom's family did this to me, or my dad's family did this to me, and that's why I am the way that I am, and now I have to deal with it. There's these emotions that we're going to end up feeling. A lot of the times it might be resentment, it might be guilt, it might be anger towards people in our family, but I want to talk about the emotions that you might experience from it so that you're kind of aware of where to go after you've felt these emotions. So there can be a lot of anger and resentment, which I said, to your family and any past situation that has happened. I think what someone could end up getting very angry about are these unresolved traumas that have happened in the family, and no one has ever brought it up. No one has ever talked about it. No one ever opens up the opportunity for anyone to heal from it. And that can create so much frustration. That can create a lot of anger. That can make people feel like, okay, why am I left with the responsibility to have to heal something because I'm the only one that recognizes it? How has no one else realized that, hey, suppressing your emotions and pretending like you're fine all the time is really unhealthy? Or, hey, acting like we have no stability, we have no money, we have no financial freedom is not healthy, because we're never going to take risks. We're never going to, get any further than where we are now. We're keeping ourselves in a bubble. Realizing that the way your parents have done certain things has not been right can be very frustrating. You end up having anger towards people. You end up having this resentment that builds up, and this kind of what the hell? How could you not care enough to address these things with me type of energy? And now that you're being left to deal with these issues, that can be extremely frustrating, because you're not the one who created the issues. You're not the one who started the problem or created the pattern, but you are left to heal from the mess that it might have made. There can be a lot of confusing and mixed emotions that come out of this as well. I think that in certain situations, you still have a lot of love and a lot of respect and a lot of good emotions towards your families, but then a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, because again, you're like, what the fuck? How could you not care enough to address these issues? So there's a confliction between you wanting to grow and move past these patterns, break these cycles, but wanting to continue to have a good relationship with your family, wanting to keep that family unit strong. I think there can be so much conflict that's built up with that decision that needs to be made. You either stick with your family, stick with the cycles, stick with the patterns, or you leave, you never interact with them, you go on your own, path, and you heal from these mistakes. But I believe in certain situations, there can be a middle ground to healing, to moving past, and still continuing to keep a decent relationship with your family. And that is through boundaries. The thing with boundaries is they only work when other people respect them. And they only work when they're fair boundaries that you would participate with from another person as well. So setting boundaries will help you protect your healing journey. I'm going to give you guys examples of boundaries that you can set that I feel like are going to be pretty common situations that you might get yourself into, and then how to address these boundaries, because I feel like I never really talk about that. I always say set your boundaries, do this, do that, but I wanted to give actual examples that are tangible for people to use. In terms of setting boundaries, you need to make sure that you're setting ones that are fair, that are just, that you would respect based off of another person setting those boundaries towards you. And also being very aware that you might not have people who will be okay with these boundaries. There might not be situations that will work with everyone. And this is where we have to have an element of like this tough skin, because if you're committed to this healing, if you're committed to switching the pattern of this generational trauma and changing things like suppressing your emotions or a constantly stressed mentality or like having this scarcity mindset or hypervigilance, like there's so many things. Obviously, I only gave a few examples, but if you're committed to changing these things and breaking these cycles and you feel like could be like a toxic dynamic within your family, it is really important to start to become okay with setting these boundaries, okay? So for an example, there could be a family member that constantly dismisses your feelings. Maybe every time you come to your parent with any type of frustration or any type of emotion that you feel, they'll say, okay, well, I've been through that before. Toughen up. It's not that serious. Like, get it together. Like, stop crying. Stop feeling like this. Like, get over it. And again, that kind of relates to our example here of a lack of any type of emotional vulnerability and being able to address another person's emotions, being able to take care of another person's emotions. And what you could say in that situation when it comes to that boundary is, hey, like, I understand that you've been through a lot. I get that you've had your own struggles, but I need to have my emotions acknowledged. And when you dismiss them like that, it makes me feel completely unheard. Let's start to focus on supporting each other in healthier ways, not dismissing each other, acknowledging each other's emotions. Now, this could feel like a very uncomfortable thing to say to a parent who you've maybe never had that kind of emotional talk with, or a sibling that you've never had that type of emotional talk with. But I do believe that the power that you'll gain from that situation, the strength that you'll gain from doing something uncomfortable like that, and you might be surprised that their reaction will be like, okay, I mean, weird, uncomfortable, but okay. Just because someone has never learned to express their emotions, has always put the Band-Aid on their emotions and acted tough and had that type of mentality, doesn't mean that they won't be open to changing and also becoming healthier. But maybe they're not as aware of it as you are, and you've done a little bit more inner work and you've thought about ways to help heal yourself, and you might be pushing another person in your family to help heal them as well, and to do a lot of healing throughout your whole family. So you never know how far and how much benefit these boundaries could go. Another example is if your family is constantly expecting you to be involved in some kind of family function every single time it happens, and you feel like there's just this toxic dynamic that you can't withstand as much as you do, right? And there might be like an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a parent, a sibling, a cousin that has a really, bad pattern that they've built up. You can't find a way to spend time with them and to not feel the life being drained out of you or sucked out of you. So what you could say is, I love spending time with you guys. I love spending time with my family, but in this situation, I need to prioritize my mental health. I don't feel good when I'm around this person, but I'd love to come and hang out and do more family things with a smaller group. Or I'd love to just hang out with you guys, or I'd love to spend time and me and you go do something else. If it's like your mom or your dad who wants you to come to some kind of family function, but there might be other people in your family that you don't get along with, that have very toxic thought processes, or who have very toxic patterns, or who might not agree with you and who you are as a person when it could come to your sexuality, who you're dating, what you do for a living. There's so many things that can cause issues in family relationships. So it's like so broad that I can't give you every single example, but they're very dependable on the situation that you're in. Okay, this one is an example that I feel like can be very, 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 very common in families. And that is this kind of like financial duty. I think sometimes when we grow up, and go and start our own lives. And maybe you've run into a lot of luck, or you've had a lot of hard work and you've started to earn more money and you could support yourself. And there's a sense of duty that you have to repay everything that you've had to your family. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If anything, I think it's very, very beautiful to go back and give as much as you can to your family. But giving so much that you don't have anything left in return is where it starts to be very sticky. And it also starts to be sticky when your family expects so much because they've done X, Y, and Z for you. I think if there's a situation where your family expects financial support out of a sense of duty, despite it causing you some kind of stress or you not having anything left for yourself, this is a boundary that you should set. And you can say something like, I can help where I can when it works, but I need to have this sense of financial stability for myself as well. I can contribute when it's possible, but I can't take on more than I can handle. I can't give more than I can handle. This is a good way to create that structure, create that balance, and genuinely just say this is as much as I can do, and I really hope you can accept that because I'm doing the best that I can. And if that is genuine coming from you, then hopefully the other people will feel that genuineness and understand that. Sometimes there's situations where family members can become very greedy. They can expect a lot because they raised you, of course. But there's situations where it's you've grown up, you're having your own life, and they still have this responsibility to take care of themselves the same way you have the responsibility to take care of yourself, and you soon will for your future children. So making sure that you are able to support yourself and you're not constantly worried about someone else is important. So moving on. Those were some good boundaries, and you can kind of take those and adapt them for different situations that you might be going through. But I wanted to answer a quick question before we get into the final juice, where we're going to get into forgiveness. Yep. Sorry, got to forgive some people in life. But I did get a couple questions in terms of family relationships. How do you have more open conversation with your parents who don't really listen and communicate? So here we go. I think that one relates very nicely to the first boundary that I explained. In this situation, like I said, you can adapt some of these. In that one, it was a lot about you're dismissing my feelings, you're dismissing my emotions, but what could be used instead if you want to be able to be openly communicating with your parents is, I'm here, I'm open for you guys. I want to be able to listen to the way that you feel so you guys can listen to the way I feel, and we have this open communication. Sometimes it's good to start, to lead by example. If you have not grown up openly communicating and expressing your feelings, expressing your thoughts, then it's not going to feel comfortable for you to do. But once you begin to do that, you might inspire other family members to follow in your footsteps. So I think that first example was a pretty good answer to this question, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but creating that boundary and being very clear that you want to start acting in a certain way and want to start being more open and expressive when it comes to your emotions is really important. What do you think about dating someone who is a family person when you're not? I think there can be benefits to dating someone who's a family person. I think it's great, honestly. I've always considered myself more of a family person, and that's a quality that I kind of look for in other people. But sometimes, obviously, there's so many discrepancies or so many things that happen in life that you won't always have a perfect relationship with your family, and I don't either. But learning more about someone else and their family dynamic kind of helps open your eyes up as well to how you can improve your own. So if you're around someone who has maybe a better family dynamic than you do, it might be beneficial for you. If you are in one of those situations where it's nope, it's a no-go, it's closed off, my relationship with my family is just not going to work, it's not going to happen, then I also think it's a benefit because that other person having a close relationship with their family will open the door for you to even have a close relationship with their family and maybe be able to heal some things that you wouldn't have been able to heal with your own family. So I think it can be very beneficial. Of course, it depends on if that person really wants you to have a good relationship with your family and that's important to them, but you're not able to give that to them. I guess it's very dependent on the situation that you're in and the person that you're with. But for the most part, I think it can be very healing to be with a person who has that type of relationship with their parents and or family so that you can be exposed to it too if you weren't in the past. All right, back to the juice. The next and final step would be forgiveness and letting go. The main reason for all of this, the main reason for even caring about the generational trauma and for even caring about the things that have happened in your parents, grandparents, whoever's past, is because you want to break the cycle and you don't want your children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren to experience and or have to deal with the pain that you might have had to or your parents might have had to. You want to be able to put a stop to things that are not healthy, that are not working, that feel toxic, and to create more positive environments, to create more positive patterns that can now be taught from family to family. It is so important because if you think about the bigger picture, you're a building block to a future generation that's going to be walking around the earth. And if we have the power to make a tiny impact on just our familial line, I find that very powerful. So if that is any inspiration to go and do the work and to break the patterns and to set the boundaries, then yeah, I hope it is. But last step in this situation is forgiving and letting go, because there can be so much, like I said, resentment, so much pain attached to the trauma that you might have experienced due to the trauma that other generations have experienced being passed down. And unfortunately, it's no one's fault. There's no one really to blame. There's no one really to sit there and be like, oh, it's your fault, and that blame will even help. So forgiving others for your peace of mind and for your benefit is so important. There could have been like a catalyst. There could have been a bad partner. There could have been a bad person. There could have been a traumatic event that happened that created the situation that you're in. But blaming them, being angry, putting all your anger towards them is never going to heal you. Forgiving them might. Forgiving them for it being their first time at life and for realizing that no one's perfect and everyone has had these years of trauma. If you feel like you have this trauma from your parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, imagine them and their parents, their great-grandparents, and the time before them. I feel like our generation might be one of the first generations to be so aware and so hyper-focused on the fact that we have a lot of work to do and we have a lot of things to heal from because there has been a lot of hardship in past generations. And I find it very positive that people are now becoming more and more aware of this and more invested in changing. Forgiveness is key. Spend time working, learning more about yourself, learning more about your family line. If you feel like you don't know where to start, that's a good place to start. So I hope this wasn't all too confusing. There's so much to this subject. I tried to make it the most digestible that I could, but I can definitely talk a bit more about it in future episodes if there were still some things left unsaid. I just wanted to give like real life tangible examples of how you could have been affected from things, because some people might be listening and might not even be aware that like these things are affecting them or that they have been a part of this like generational trauma and are like feeling the repercussions of it, but like didn't know at the time, didn't know that it came from that. So I wish you guys the best of luck when it comes to breaking these patterns. Like I said, we're here to build a better generation and better patterns for ourselves, even to have healthier, happier lives, happier dynamics with our future partners, happier dynamics with our future children. So this was a really interesting episode, honestly. I'm not gonna lie. I'm left scratching my head a little bit because I'm like, did I even explain things as well as I could have? I hope. It was a lot. It was jam-packed, full of information. So yeah, I love you guys. Don't forget to rate the podcast 5 stars, leave some good reviews, leave a thumbs up, leave a heart emoji, thumbs up, kiss emoji in my reviews. Okay, love you so much. I'll talk to you guys in my next episode. Bye.